Hundreds of thousands of
Mississippians like me
depend on public benefits for healthcare, food, and housing.
To receive these benefits,
I cannot have more than $2,000 in my name.
With Able,
I can save
for my future without losing my much-needed benefits.
I couldn't plan on savings before,
But now
I am
able.
Visit MississippiAble.com to get started.
All right, welcome to the Mississippi Able Town Hall meeting brought to you by the Mississippi Department of Rehabilitation Services and the Mississippi Able Board. My name is Billy Taylor. I'm the Chief of Staff at MDRS, the Mississippi Department of Rehab Services. And we're very honored a couple years ago when the legislature chose our agency to help administer this program. It's certainly been very exciting for us to see this from its early stages, come to fruition all the way to, what it is today. We're excited to share more information about it with you guys today. We have a relatively small group, so we're definitely going to have time for some audience questions, and we'll try to keep it as informal as possible. We do have a couple quick housekeeping things. We have some people joining us on Facebook Live and a Zoom meeting as well. So for you guys joining online, if you want to ask any questions, please utilize the chat feature. We have somebody monitoring that, and they will relay those questions to myself and our panel here, and we'll do our best to get those questions answered. And if you would, you can keep your mic muted. That would help with the sound quality for the other folks in the chat rooms as well. So with us today, we have a couple of the ABLE board members. We have Mr. Courtney, who is the chairman of our ABLE board, and Mr. Paul Rogers. So Mr. Courtney, I'll start with you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your involvement with the ABLE program?
Thank you, Billy. I'm glad to be involved with the ABLE board. I am a father of an adult daughter with disabilities. She has cerebral palsy, learning disabilities, and is a wheelchair user and lives with us. And so she has had a good life through her education and now works part-time in my law firm. Yes, I'm a lawyer too, and I do a lot of special needs planning with families as part of our estate planning practice. So I am a professional helping people who have disabled children or adults in their family, or it may be the person with a disability and also the parent of a child with a disability, an adult child with a disability now. So that was how I got interested in this work. And when ABLE came about and I learned about that legislation, I was delighted because now my daughter has some excess resources that she would not have been allowed to have by the Medicaid waiver that she participates in, but the ABLE account has allowed her to have some greater financial independence. So that's how I got involved, and they invited me to be on the board, and so that's where we are.
All right, thanks a lot, Mr. Courtney. All right, Mr. Rogers, what about you? What's your involvement with ABLE? Where does that come from?
Well, my involvement is similar to that of Mr. Courtney. I have an adult disabled child who lives on our property. He has his own small house behind ours, and he too receives benefits. He's not on the Medicaid waiver, but he does have resource-based benefits, and the ABLE account gave him an opportunity to accumulate something in his own name without having to be concerned about losing his benefits. The ABLE program has worked very well for him. We obtained an ABLE account for him early on, and we still utilize it and are happy to do that. And I will say that the department has done very well implementing this program. I'm very proud to be associated with it, and that's due in large part to the guidance and support that we get from your department.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Rick and Paul. So these two guys are two of the 9 members that are charged with overseeing the ABLE program. So let me kind of run through those other 7 members just so you kind of have some context of how the program's administered here in our state. So we have 2 members that are what's called ex officio members. Just by virtue of their job, they're automatically on the ABLE board. And those are Mr. David McCrae, who's our state treasurer. So whoever the state treasurer is automatically on the ABLE board. And then also the executive director over at the Department of Mental Health, who is Wendy Bailey. And then our executive director, Chris Howard. So those 3 members are automatically on the board by virtue of their position. And then the governor has 6 appointments he makes to the board. 2 of those appointments are these gentlemen here. And the other ones are Miss Kimberly Remack up in North Mississippi. She's a board member of the ARC of Northwest Mississippi. Miss Jane Buttress is an attorney and a board member for the Coalition for Citizens with Disabilities. Michael Slogel is an attorney, or not an attorney, a banker down on the coast. He represents the 2nd Supreme Court District and works with Hancock Whitney Bank down there. And then lastly is Pam Dollar, who is the executive director of the Mississippi Coalition for Citizens with Disabilities. So those members make up the 9-member board, and they're charged with the kind of big picture decisions that go into administering this ABLE program. And then our role at MDRS is to kind of follow their direction. They'll tell us how to implement the program, and then we really go out around the state and try to assist Mississippians with disabilities to get those accounts opened, help spread the word about the ABLE program. So before we get into more of a panel discussion, we have a quick video that I'd like to show you.
There's a new opportunity for Mississippians with disabilities to achieve a better life experience. A groundbreaking program called ABLE allows individuals with disabilities a greater opportunity to save and invest money.
And what that does is it allows the individual to save for the future, but the big part of that is it does not affect their benefits. They can put that money back for the future and not have to worry, is that going to knock me out of Medicaid, or is that going to knock me out of my disability check?
The Achieving a Better Life Experience, or ABLE Act, was passed by Congress in 2014, allowing the creation of ABLE savings accounts. In 2017, Mississippi authorized the ABLE program, and Mississippians began opening ABLE accounts in June 2019. ABLE savings accounts are for individuals with disabilities. The savings will not affect public benefits. Accounts can be used like regular bank accounts, as well as for long-term savings. ABLE accounts may also provide tax advantages.
They should be able to plan for the future, to plan for that leaky roof. If they want to buy a book, if they want to take a class, if they want to improve the housing situation that they're in, saving for that has been an impediment. Or receiving gifts to help them with that has been an impediment. So the important thing about ABLE is that it addresses that sort of cultural norm that we thought you need to be destitute if we're going to give you benefits to help lift you up, and change that into, yeah, we're going to let you manage some money and maybe help keep your life on a more even keel.
Residents of Mississippi ought to be enthused about the prospect that now people with disabilities, and we have a large population, I think 25% approximately of Mississippians have a disability of some sort, and now those people who have SSI and Medicaid benefits have a way to save some money, use some other funds without jeopardizing those benefits. So it is a big thing for Mississippi.
The Mississippi ABLE program is overseen by a governor-appointed board and is administered by the Mississippi Department of Rehabilitation Services. To learn more about setting up an ABLE account, please visit MississippiABLE.com or call 1-888-609-3469.
All right. So as the video mentioned, we launched this program. It's been about a little over 3 years ago now. So we've traveled around the state and really tried to, get the word out to Mississippians that may qualify for this. And throughout that process, we've got a lot of great feedback and great questions from people interested. So what we've done today is kind of compiled a list of the most frequently asked questions and brought in a couple of the leading experts in our state on the subject matter. So I'll run through a few of these questions that we get most commonly, and then we can take some questions from you guys in the audience, or I know the people online often submit questions as well, so we'll have time for that in a few minutes. So Mr. Courtney, why don't I start with you? Why don't you just give us a little background on the need for ABLE in our state?
Okay, and Mr. Courtney was my dad. You can call me Rick.
All right, Rick.
Yeah, okay. As many of you know, in order to be a participant in the SSI program, which brings Medicaid benefits in Mississippi, which is very important, and for some people more important than the check from the government, or the Medicaid waiver programs or nursing home programs in Mississippi. Those programs have resource limits. The amount of assets you can own is very limited. For SSI, it's $2,000, and it's been that since the early 80s. And for the waiver programs and nursing home Medicaid, it's $4,000. So that's all someone could own in a bank account and still qualify for those benefits for those programs. Well, Congress people, some congressmen and some disability advocates back in the mid-teens, early 2010 and thereafter started realizing it's going to be a hard pull to get Congress to raise the asset limit to what it would be now if it had been indexed for inflation, like a lot of other Social Security programs. It'd be about $8,500 now instead of $2,000. But that was not really going to be politically easy, so they focused on the ABLE account and passed that legislation, as I said, in 2014 to allow a person with SSI or Medicaid benefits who has a disability that began before age 26. That person can now have an ABLE account in addition to the $2,000 or $4,000 that they can have and still maintain those benefits. The ABLE account is not counted by Social Security or Medicaid as a resource for those benefits.
All right. Thanks, Rick. All right, Paul, why don't we talk for a second about the eligibility for these ABLE programs? You know, who's eligible to open an ABLE account?
So the ABLE program is open to individuals who have a disability. Most often it's a disability that is assigned by Social Security in connection with a claim for SSI, but it doesn't have to be. If you're not on Social Security disability nor on SSI, you can still obtain a certificate of disability from a physician, and that will suffice for establishing that you have a disability. So, and the disability must have been acquired before age 26. So if you were born with disability, which is quite often, or if during your younger years you suffer a disabling injury before age 26, you are eligible to have an ABLE account. Something Rick said that I recently ran across, which is somewhat less common, is the individuals who have dual eligibility, both for Medicare, both for Social Security or Medicare and Medicaid. They receive Medicare because they have Social Security disability, but they also receive Medicaid because of the insufficiency of their assets and their lowered income. And that's an area that you can, those individuals may not realize that if they acquire over $2,000, that could affect their dual eligibility status. So it's very important, if you have dual eligibility, to look at that and see how it could affect you and determine if an ABLE account would be appropriate for your situation, especially to guard against getting over the $2,000 or $4,000 in assets, because that I've seen that before creep up on someone and not realize it until they get a letter from Medicaid saying your benefits have been terminated because you have more than the amount of allowed assets. And again, if you have that going into an ABLE account, you just never have to worry about it. So individuals with a disability before age 26 can establish an ABLE account.
Let me add something to that, Billy. He talked about an exception. I had another exceptional circumstance with a client, a young adult woman who had some intellectual disabilities, had very expensive medications, and she was on the Extra Help program through Medicare. That program runs with policies similar to those of SSI, so there are restrictions on how much resources she could own and still be on the Extra Help to pay for that real expensive medication, several $1,000s a month, and she didn't have it. Well, she was going to get a small automobile accident lawsuit settlement, about $20,000 from insurance on a lawsuit. She called me in a panic and said, "What am I going to do?" I said, "Well, it was last year when the ABLE account limit was $15,000 per year. I said, stick the first $15,000 in an ABLE account. Spend the other $5,000 real quick, you're back where you were. She said, I can do that. I mean, I need some clothes, furniture, and some other stuff, pay off a credit card, put 15 in an ABLE account. She never bumped over that limit, and she was delighted she was able to keep her, she was panicking that she would lose that drug coverage.
All right, so, oh, yes, sir.
I'm sorry? The question was about transferring to land, transfer land. Well, land, if it's not part of your residence, land that you own is a resource, countable resource for SSI or Medicaid. So unless you inherited it, then it's not countable by Medicaid. We're getting into some of the weeds about the programs, but you have to determine, is it countable? If so, how do I get it out of my, well, you can't put land in an ABLE account, as we'll note in a minute. You can't buy an ABLE account with land, but you got to do something else with that.
All right, so Paul, how much does it cost to open up an ABLE account?
Well, the actual cost is nothing, but there is a minimum of $25 to open the account, but there is no cost to actually open up the account.
Okay, great. All right, and so Rick, are there any tax advantages to these ABLE accounts?
Yes, there are. For someone who contributes to an ABLE account in Mississippi, if a Mississippi resident contributes to an ABLE account for themselves or for others, there would be a state income tax deduction for the amount of that contribution. So if I put money in my daughter's ABLE account, I may get a state income tax deduction for that contribution to the ABLE account. Once the money is in the account for the individual with the disability who owns the account, the interest it earns is tax-free while it's in there. They won't pay income tax on the earnings that it has while it's in the account. And as we'll learn a little bit more detail later, when they spend the money out of it, that is not taxable if it's spent for qualified disability-related things. And that's a broad range of things we'll see. So there shouldn't be tax on the money going in. There shouldn't be tax while it's in there. Shouldn't be tax coming out. And I'm looking at the CPA tax attorney to verify that.
That's my understanding as well, as long as the account is properly maintained. And you bring up a point in your comment, Rick, is that the agency, the only agency that would ever look at an ABLE account would be the IRS, and that would be highly unlikely, but the ABLE account is established through the tax laws, and so they are the agency that would have responsibility for it, say if money was spent improperly, or if the account is not used properly. But again, the likelihood of that is slim to none.
Yeah, Paul, can you talk to us about how those funds can be used? Like, what exactly is a qualified disability-related expense?
Well, they're just ordinary living expenses, rent, utilities, groceries, medical supplies, educational programs, legal fees, financial management. You can set aside money for funeral and burial expenses. If you need personal support services and aid, if you did therapy at home, you could just about anything that enables the account holder to live independently. It's easier to think of the things that do qualify than don't qualify. Pretty much any ordinary living expense would qualify as a allowable expenditure from the ABLE account.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. All right, Rick, I get this question all the time. So are these ABLE accounts, are they checking accounts? Is it a savings account? Is it an investment vehicle? Like, where does it fall into that? Which category does it fall into?
There's all kinds of ABLE accounts. You can have an ABLE account that is invested in a checking account, and you can request paper checks if you want those. You can have a debit card that they'll issue to you if you want that to help with facility of spending money in the community from your ABLE checking account. So like Paul was saying, if you're out and you're buying something and you need a way to buy it on the spot, you need a check or you need a debit card. So those are available on the checking account. There are also investment accounts that you can choose. I think there are 5 levels, if not 6, from very aggressive, where your money's at risk, going up and down in the market, to very conservative, where it's very little risk, but maybe not earning quite as much in the up times. So you can change your portfolio. You can only change the investments in your ABLE account portfolio twice a year. That's the maximum number of times. So you don't have any day traders in stocks in ABLE accounts. But that's it. There's a broad range of vehicles available to be able to hold the money, invest in certain ways, and then have ways to spend the money if you need it.
All right, thanks, Rick. And I know both of you guys have helped individuals open up ABLE accounts before. You've opened them up before for your children. So what is that sign-up process like? How long does it take? What kind of information do people need when they sit down to actually open up that ABLE account?
Well, it can be opened online on the Mississippi ABLE website, or you can do it by paper application if you would prefer to do that. Or you could get the paper application, fill it out so you have all the information in front of you, and then go online and input that. None of the information needed is complicated or difficult to find. It would probably, if you were opening it for a family member, it's name, address, social security number, that basic type of information. There are questions that are asked on the sign-up pages to help you determine if you in fact qualify and have a disability. But it's a relatively user-friendly application process online. If you have the information you need in front of you, somewhere 15, 20 minutes or so is what it would take to sit down and open the account. Certainly if you read up on it and have the background information in mind when you undertake to do that and kind of have an understanding of what you're doing, you would have a easier time of it. But it is relatively user-friendly, and if you run into difficulty on it, there is a help number that you can call, and they will provide assistance. One of the things Rick said is I think the provider for the investment accounts is Vanguard, if I'm not mistaken. So these would be through Vanguard, and I think the bank that is associated with it is the Fifth Third Bank, which is a large national bank. So you are dealing with well-known financial institutions. There is virtually no risk involved other than market risk that would be associated with the type of investment account that you undertake.
You mentioned Fifth Third Bank, and that bank does have a system of ATM machines in south half of Mississippi, maybe a few in the north, but I remember they've got a number in the south half of Mississippi. So there, you may live close to where you could go get money out of your ABLE account at an ATM.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Yeah, that ATM system is called the Allpoint ATM system. So if you Google that, it'll kind of bring up a map, type in our state. It'll show you where I think there's 350 or so ATM machines in Mississippi that's part of that system. And when Paul was mentioning the bank, it made me think of, that I didn't bring this up earlier, that Mississippi has joined what's called the National ABLE Alliance. So our board made the decision to group together with now 20 other states to offer this product, a very similar product, to all the citizens that qualify. So there's 20 states in the alliance. We've hired one program administrator to be the administrator for the program. So these big banks and these Vanguard investment packages, Mississippians get to choose from that, but there's also about half the nation that's utilizing the same package of funds to run their ABLE account. So I thought that was worth mentioning. So before we take some of these audience Q&As, and I know we have some that were submitted online, there's one more video we'd like to show. Our communications team did a great job of putting this together with one of our very first ABLE account owners here in Mississippi. It's a grandmother named Audrey Jordan and her grandson Markel, and they've been great advocates for ABLE accounts since they've opened theirs. So why don't we roll this video, and then we'll roll into some questions after that.
can't think about the right now. You got to think about the future.
Marjorie Jordan has spent much of the past preparing her grandson for the future.
It's kind of different when you're a grandparent raising a child versus being the parent. Number one, we second guess ourselves all the time. And I still do sometimes. I wonder if. But I just try to make an intelligent decision with whatever I have at that time. And once I make that decision, I know I got to abide by it.
Sometimes I take care of her, and she take care of me.
We don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. Anything can happen. That's money we could have. And what I did is when we set the account up, I set it up so some of it would actually go into a checking account for him so he could spend it on items related to his care if it's something he needs to purchase. But I also put it in, set it up so I invested a portion of it as well so that it would grow some. And again, that's more money he would have if something happens. And as he gets older, he would have something to fall back on to help him out. So you have parents that are afraid for their children to go to work because if those benefits are cut off, they won't have enough to live off. With the ABLE Act, you don't have to worry about it. Let those children work. Give them a chance in life to be what they can be.
All right, why don't we pause now and see if we have any questions from the audience for the panel. Yes, sir.
I have a couple of questions. The first one, I talked to a couple of people that were injured after the age of 26. And so I was wanting to know if there is anything out there that will that's in the works that will be able to help those individuals that don't qualify simply because their disability, their onset occurred after the age of 26.
Sure.
Sure, and you might be asking, why was the age of 26 picked? Well, when this legislation was first proposed in Congress, it had no age limit on it. And when Congressional Budget Office, as they have to do on all legislation that's going to cost the federal budget money, they had to score it. It was going to cost $20 billion in additional SSI and Medicaid payments for people over the next 10 years. They didn't have offsetting $20 billion to cut somewhere else. When they put an age 26 limit on it, it dropped it from $20 billion to $2 billion. And that was basically the coffee budget for that committee in Congress. So they said, yeah, we can do this. That's why that's on there. But ever since, there have been disability advocacy organizations that have been advocating with Congress raise that limit. There is currently in Congress a bill that's been there for the last few years called the Able Age Adjustment Act. And it would raise the limit, the age limit to 46. So any disability that had an onset date prior to age 46 would be eligible for an ABLE account. It's not passed yet. It's kind of going through Congress. The latest we've heard is there's optimism that it's in a package that Congress may pass, and so we're hoping and praying that it will. And but right now it's still 26.
Okay, thank you. The other question is, most of us, here know that the biggest barrier in the disability community is trust. So I was wanting to know if does Medicaid and Social Security, have they been properly trained on ABLE, or will there ever be a case where a person with a disability has to explain it to them after they've received ABLE?
Probably so. There probably will be a case when that does have to be explained, but you do have the benefit of it being a well-established program that if they simply go behind it, they would realize that this doesn't affect your eligibility. So certainly it'd probably be asked, but it's easily answered in a way that benefits the individual holding the account.
And there are specific policy sections in Medicaid's policy manual online, so we can copy those out, give them to a caseworker who did not know about ABLE. They immediately know about ABLE, and it's clear explanation for them. Also, the SSI policies in their policy operation manual online, since ABLE was enacted, it has been there, and they have clear policies telling their reviewers, here's how you treat ABLE, and so yes, it's in the law, it's clear. There are policies out there in both Medicaid and Social Security agencies that can be used to educate or inform someone who's not aware of this. But yeah, you have people that aren't aware of it, and you do have to educate them sometimes.
After the account has been set up, if that person dies, what happens to that money?
There is a Medicaid payback in the ABLE law. Just like for special needs trusts of some types, when in our practice we sometimes will have an attorney call and say, my client is on SSI or Medicaid and they've just gotten a lawsuit settlement of some sort. Can we put it in a special needs trust? I say, yes, they can put their own money, their own assets into a special needs trust and keep their benefits. Medicaid and SSI won't count that trust. But that trust has to say when that individual dies, if there's anything left in their trust, it goes first to Medicaid, pay Medicaid back, then it goes to other family or charities or whoever they want to leave it to. ABLE has a similar Medicaid payback. The ABLE law says at the death of the ABLE account owner, the state may impose, it didn't say it had to like the trust laws do, it said the state may impose a payback requirement to Medicaid. Mississippi has imposed that in our policies. So Medicaid will seek to recover back money that they paid for medical expenses. Social Security never asked for money back, but Medicaid would have a payback claim from an ABLE account. But a difference in some special needs trusts, you got to pay Medicaid back first, and you can't pay for a funeral or burial expenses. And if you hadn't already done it, that's a problem. But in the ABLE legislation, it says final expenses and wrap-up things can be paid from the ABLE account before the Medicaid payback.
Good afternoon. I heard you say earlier that you can put up to $15,000 a year in the ABLE account. Is there a maximum amount of money that you can have in the ABLE account, period?
Yes. The maximum under the current law is $235,000. And then if it's over $100,000, they can count that for the SSI resource limit. So for someone on SSI, effectively it would be $100,000. But if you had someone that was on Social Security disability rather than SSI, it would be $235,000.
And you mentioned $15,000. This year it went up to $16,000. So it's now $16,000 per year total that could go into an ABLE account. And that's from all sources. So if there's a young adult child with a disability and they've got divorced parents and one sets up an ABLE account and puts $16,000 in it, and nobody else can contribute any money to an ABLE account that year, the rest of that year for that individual. It's one account that doesn't count. The rest would be countable. And as Paul was saying, my daughter who's on a Medicaid waiver but not SSI, her account can accumulate up to $235,000 before it would affect Medicaid. But if she was on SSI, when it goes over $100,000, they don't terminate the SSI eligibility, they suspend it. That's a different thing than they used to do. They suspend it so that if she goes over $135,000 but later buys a accessible van and drops back below $100,000, SSI reinstates her payment. Okay.
We got one question we received from Facebook, so I'll take that one real quick while she's passing the mic. So do you have to be receiving Social Security benefits in order to be eligible for ABLE, or is there some other way to prove your eligibility for an ABLE account?
There is another way. That would be the written diagnosis from a licensed physician stating that you have a disability that would qualify you for SSI or Social Security disability. You don't actually have to be receiving those benefits or ever to have applied, but you can get a certificate from the physician so stating, and that will enable you to have or qualify you to open an ABLE account.
All right, thanks, Paul. Other question out there?
Regarding items spent out of the account, you mentioned that there are a significant number that would be covered in terms of disability needs, but what about those items, albeit rare, that someone would want to spend their money on that are not really related to disability? How would that affect their situation if they were to try to spend money out of their ABLE account that wasn't specifically disability related?
Well, so what's something that, say hypothetically, they had a Disney World? Okay, Disney World tickets. Theoretically, or under the law, you would be the ABLE account holder would have to pay the tax on the money, the little bit of money that they spent on something that's not allowed. They would have to include that as taxable income, but again, you would have to be over the filing limit to start with. Before you would have to be required to file a tax return and pay tax before it would ever cost you anything. So, as a practical matter, there is not a penalty, but under the law there is if you fell into some very small group of ABLE account holders that would have taxable income, and if you spent $500 on Disney tickets, you would have to pay theoretically the tax on, or actually tax on the earnings of the ABLE account of that $500. So to begin with, it wouldn't have earned very much, and again, as a practical matter, there's not a penalty. There is in the law, but it just would be highly unusual that it would ever actually apply.
I'm going to try to do an illustration, and he can correct me if this is kind of inaccurate, just kind of bring it to some real number. If I have $5,000 in my ABLE account and I spend $500 or 10% of that on Disney World tickets, something not really qualified disability expense, the taxable portion of that is not $500. It is not that distribution. It is the income. It is the income on the non-qualified part. So if my overall ABLE account earned $100 in interest over that year, 10% of that income, that $100 would be the taxable portion, or $10 for spending $500 on Disney World tickets. So that gets into a little bit of the weeds. I think he could correct me if I was wrong, but that's kind of an illustration I've come around to use to understand it.
And one common concern we've had from people is, all right, am I going to open up an ABLE account and then have a bunch of hoops to jump through to get my money? Like, do I have to prove that I have a disability-related expense in order to swipe the debit card or to write that check? And the answer to that is no. Like, it's the debit card option, the checking account, the electronic transfers are just like any bank account. I mean, you can swipe that debit card and it's going to work anywhere regardless of what the purchase is. Like, there's no mechanism to say, all right, this is a disability-related expense, so it's going to work, versus this is a non-disability-related expense, so it's going to decline the transaction. It's your money. You can spend it wherever you would like. However, there are some small tax ramifications if you're audited on the account and spent the money where it's not a qualified disability-related expense. Yes, ma'am.
For the whole year, or is that like if someone were to have that much and then spend some, and then can it ebb and flow, or is it at any one time it can only be 235 or 135? It's a lot, but people ask me questions associated with trust and which should they do and all that. So,
I would think it would be at the point in time you would lose your eligibility, but if 2 weeks later you buy the van that Rick was speaking about
Then
and
it
come
comes
back down, but it would float and fluctuate. But I would say that the answer would be at any time during the year, and I don't really know exactly how it would work in practice, but that's what the law says.
And then the second part of that is, I understand it's 16,000 total per year. Does that include an opening amount? Can you open it with the max, or is it only 16,000 for opening?
No, that is 16, able accounts can only receive 16,000 total per calendar year right now this year. That would include an opening amount, so if someone opens an account with 16,000, that account can't receive any more money that year until January of the next year. And so, and your previous question about when, if you go over the limit, the 100,000 or the 235 and then back down, when you get up to that area, Medicaid and SSI policies require a recipient of those benefits to notify the agency office anytime they receive any countable income. Well, a contribution that throws it over that limit includes a countable part. So they're supposed to let the agency know, and then SSI, under the way I understand they do it, they would suspend an SSI payment for any month when their account is over 100,000. But then they drop it back down, then they reinstate the payment.
So with the 16,000 that can be contributed into the account each year, that's the total contributions for the year. So before someone is going to run up against this $100,000 issue with the Social Security benefits and the $235,000 max, it's going to be a few years before we run into those issues. But it is nice to know that Social Security has told us that your benefits will just be suspended. So if you do go over it, you don't have to go through the whole application process again for applying for those benefits. So we're told it's going to be sort of seamless for the end user if they do go over that $100,000 mark. We do know there's some reporting requirements for all the ABLE programs around the nation to report to SSA the account balances for that reason, to make sure nobody's over that $100,000 threshold. Because when that day comes, they're going to have a mechanism in place to suspend those benefits for those accounts over that amount.
And Billy, you just said the magic word employee or employer. That made me think, for a person with a disability who is working, it's not limited to $16,000 a year. The individual who owns the ABLE account can contribute in addition to that an amount up to the federal poverty level of income for one person from their earnings. And that's about $12,880 a year. So a person like my daughter who's working could contribute, I could put $16,000 in her ABLE account. She could contribute from her earnings at a job up to another $12,800 a year into her ABLE account. So she could have $28,000 plus going in every year.
We have time for one more question.
Can you open an ABLE account at any bank?
No. You can only open one through a state ABLE account in this case, in Mississippi, through our Mississippi ABLE website and application. You can open one in another state, I suppose, if you wanted to. Before Mississippi had ABLE accounts, occasionally someone would have a need for one and open one through another state's program. But now that we have ABLE accounts, there's no reason to do that. But you do have to go through the state ABLE account provider, in this case Department of Rehabilitation Services, and the bank that if you choose the checking account option, it would be the Fifth Third Bank, which again, you can have a debit card, paper checks. It's a typical checking account with all the features that people are used to having in checking accounts.
Yeah, it is important to visit our website at MississippiABLE.com to open up that ABLE account, because the state of Virginia, they were really tricky with their Google algorithm, or how they purchase their Google sponsorship, I don't know. But if you just Google ABLE, it'll take you to what's called ABLE Now, and it kind of looks like, oh, this is an ABLE account. So a lot of Mississippians have mistakenly opened up a Virginia ABLE account by just going to the first search feature after they type it into Google. So it is important to do it through the website, or just make sure it's a Mississippi ABLE program and not one of the other states. So we have had to reverse a few Virginia ABLE accounts, because they do receive a lot of the same benefits. If you open up an account through another program, like if you open up a Virginia account, you would receive a lot of these benefits we're talking about today, but you'll lose out on those state tax advantages. So that's why it's important, if you live in Mississippi, to make sure you open up a Mississippi ABLE account.
And Billy, I'm sorry.
You're good. Go ahead.
Everybody in their bag that you got has this brochure in it. It's got the website and the phone number at the bottom on the front of this brochure. You need to look at it and memorize that phone number and tell your friends and go to the website.
Thank you, Rick. I'm Jennifer Gray, Communication Director for MDRS. Thank you for being in attendance today with us. I know I learned a lot. I'm sure you did as well. We held a contest in August. Billy, will you tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. So August is actually what's called National Able to Save Month. So Mississippi, along with the other 20 states in the National ABLE Alliance, and really all the ABLE programs throughout the nation, really try to celebrate having ABLE as a tool in the people with disabilities toolbox during the month of August. So to help promote that month, we partnered with the Rehabilitation Association of Mississippi, and they provided the funding to put an additional $100 deposit into all ABLE accounts that were opened up last month in August. So there's actually 20 accounts opened up last August, and Rehabilitation Association of Mississippi, RAM as we call it, has agreed to give another $500 deposit to one of those 20 account openers for the month of August. So what we've done is we've put all 20 of those account openers' name and information on one of these little sheets of paper here. So I'll ask one of these board members here to pull out a name out of the hat, and then we'll deposit an additional $500 into their ABLE account.
And the lucky winner is Gregory from Madison County.
All right. So
Gregory, if you're listening, you're the lucky winner.
all right, great. So yeah, super excited for Gregory to get that additional $500. So thank you to RAM for that extra benefit for those ABLE account openers. So Rick, any kind of closing thoughts on the ABLE program generally, or where do people need to go to find more information, that sort of thing?
Well, as I mentioned, the website Mississippi ABLE, all spelled out, don't abbreviate Mississippi, MississippiABLE.com. You can find information like what we've shared with you today about how ABLE works. Can also find the ability to sign up for an ABLE account at that website. You also have the phone number if you need assistance. There are operators there who will take your call and help you through that process and answer other questions. But I hope we've explained how valuable ABLE is and ABLE accounts are for people with disabilities as a tool for financial independence, greater than they've ever been able to do before, and also to provide resources for like grandparents, aunts, uncles to contribute to a savings account for a person with a disability without having to put it in somebody else's name. Let's put it in their name and let them use it and have access to that, to save for longer term purchases, to use for daily care needs. It can serve both those purposes. So if there's any other information you need down the road, you can call the ABLE number or call Billy Taylor. What's your cell phone number? No, what happened to at the Mississippi Department of Rehab Services. They are wonderful, and they've got agents all over the state in their offices who can assist with these questions.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for serving on the panel. So we are the Mississippi Department of Rehabilitation Services, and ABLE is one of the programs that fall within our agency, but I just wanted to kind of reiterate and kind of bring it back out to a 30,000-foot view of what our agency does. You know, we're the one-stop agency for Mississippians with disabilities. So we provide all kind of different tools and programs to help individuals live and work as independently as possible. So we have our vocational rehabilitation programs, and they provide individualized plans for employment to help individuals, get that career goal they're after, or maintain their current job, whatever supports they may need in order to do that. We provide some supports, as Rick mentioned earlier, on those Medicaid waivers. We operate 2 of those that help individuals live independently rather than being in a nursing home or long-term care facility. We also process all of the disability claims that come in from Social Security Administration at MDRS. So we like to look at ourselves as kind of the one-stop shop for people with disabilities. We have about 50 offices around the state. We have a website, mdrs.ms.gov, that is a great resource to find in the office closest to you or to find more information on one of our programs. So I would encourage you guys to check out that website if you have any questions about any of our other programs at MDRS. So thank y'all so much for joining us. Had a good time. There's some great questions y'all asked. We'll definitely be sticking around afterwards if anyone wants to grab us to ask more specific questions about their particular case. So thank you guys.
At the Mississippi Department of Rehabilitation Services, our employees are dedicated to making a difference in the lives of Mississippians with disabilities. Thousands have been helped by our services. If you are looking for a new career or you want to learn more about our services that could help you live more independently, we are here to help. Please visit our website at mdrs.ms.gov